The Iranian Embassy siege took place from the 30th of April to the 5th of May 1980, after a group of 6 armed men stormed the Iranian Embassy in South Kensington, London. The hostage-takers, members of an Iranian Arab group campaigning for Arab national sovereignty in the southern region of Khuzestan province, demanded the release of Arab prisoners from jails in Khuzestan and their own safe passage out of the United Kingdom. The British government quickly resolved that safe passage would not be granted, and a siege ensued. Over the following days, police negotiators secured the release of 5 hostages in exchange for minor concessions, such as the broadcasting of the hostage-takers' demands on British television. By the 6th day of the siege, the gunmen had become increasingly frustrated at the lack of progress in meeting their demands. That evening, they killed one of the hostages and threw his body out of the embassy. As a result, the British government ordered the Special Air Service, a special forces regiment of the British Army, to conduct an assault to rescue the remaining hostages. Shortly afterwards, soldiers abseiled from the roof of the building and forced entry through the windows. During the 17-minute raid, the Shash rescued all but one of the remaining hostages, and killed 5 of the 6 terrorists. The soldiers subsequently faced accusations that they unnecessarily killed 2 of the terrorists, but an inquest into the deaths eventually cleared the Shash of any wrongdoing. The remaining terrorist was prosecuted and served 27 years in British prisons. The hostage-takers and their cause were largely forgotten after the Iran-Iraq War broke out later that year, and the hostage crisis in Tehran continued until January 1981. However, the operation brought the Shash to the public eye for the first time and bolstered the reputation of Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister. The Shash was quickly overwhelmed by the number of applications it received from people inspired by the operation and, at the same time, experienced greater demand for its expertise from foreign governments. It was not until 1993 that 16 Princes Gate, having suffered major damage from a fire that broke out during the assault, was reopened as the Iranian Embassy. Background. Motives. The hostage-takers were members of the Democratic Revolutionary Front for the Liberation of Arabistan, Iranian Arabs protesting for the establishment of an autonomous Arab state in the southern region of the Iranian province of Khuzestan, which is home to an Arabic-speaking minority. The oil-rich area had become the source of much of Iran's wealth, having been developed by multinational companies during the reign of the Shah. According to OAN Ali Mohammed, suppression of the Arab sovereignty movement was the spark that led to his desire to attack the Iranian embassy in London, a plan inspired by the Iran hostage crisis in which supporters of the revolution held the staff of the American embassy in Tehran hostage. Arrival in London using Iraqi passports. OAN and 3 other members of the DRFLA arrived in London on the 31st of March 1980 and rented a flat in Earl's Court. They claimed they had met by chance on the flight. The men typically returned to the flat drunk, late at night, and sometimes accompanied by prostitutes. Within a week, the housekeeper asked them to leave. They soon found another flat, where they told their new landlord they were moving because they had been joined by other men and required larger accommodation. Over the following days, the group swelled, with up to a dozen men in the flat on one occasion. OAN was 27 and from Khuzestan. He had studied at the University of Tehran, where he became politically active. He had been imprisoned by SAVAK, the Shah's secret police, and Borskars, which he said were from torture in SAVAK custody. The other members of his group were Shakir Abdullah Adil, known as Faisal, owned second-in-command, who also claimed to have been tortured by SAVAK, Shakir Sultan said, or Hassan, Thamir Mohammad Hussein, or Abbas, Fauzi Badavi Nadad, or Ali, and Maki Hanoun Ali, the youngest of the group, who went by the name of Maki. On the 30th of April, the men informed their landlord that they were going to Bristol for a week and then returning to Iraq. stated that they would no longer require the flat, and arranged for their belongings to be sent to Iraq. They left the building at 9:30 on the 30th of April. Their initial destination is unknown, but en route to the Iranian embassy they collected firearms, ammunition and hand grenades. The weapons, predominantly Soviet-made, are believed to have been smuggled into the United Kingdom in a diplomatic bag belonging to Iraq. Shortly before 11:30, and almost 2 hours after vacating the nearby flat in Lexham Gardens in South Kensington, the 6 men arrived outside the embassy. Special Air Service. The Special Air Service is a regiment of the British Army and part of the United Kingdom's Special Forces. The regiment was formed by Colonel David Stirling in Africa in 1941, at the height of the Second World War. Its original role was to penetrate enemy lines and strike at airfields and supply lines deep in enemy territory, first in North Africa and later around the Mediterranean and in occupied Europe. Stirling established the principle of using small teams, usually of just 4 men, to carry out raids, having realized that a 4-man team could sometimes prove much more effective than a unit of hundreds of soldiers. Western governments were prompted to form specialist anti-terrorist units following the Munich massacre. During the 1972 Olympic Games, a firefight between a group of hostage-takers and West German police left a police officer and all the hostages dead. The British government, worried that the country was unprepared for a similar crisis in the United Kingdom, ordered the formation of the Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Wing of the SHASH, which became the UK's primary anti-terrorist and anti-hijacking unit. The SHASH had taken part in counter-insurgency operations abroad since 1945, and had trained the bodyguards of influential people whose deaths would be contrary to British interests. Thus, it was believed to be better prepared for the role than any unit in the police or elsewhere in the armed forces. The CRW Wing's first operational experience was the storming of Lufthansa Flight 181 in 1977, when a small detachment of soldiers were sent to assist GSG-9, the elite West German police unit, set up after the events of 1972.